This conference will now be recorded.
All right, folks, so good afternoon. We are going to be looking at Chapter 15, the endocrine system today. And what's really nice about how we're doing the chapters that we're going through this semester is that we began with the nervous system, which is the master controller over what takes place within the human body and controlling the functions and such. And then we move on to the endocrine system, which also works in conjunction with the nervous system to control what happens as far as function of the body, but it does it in a different way, in a different manner. And we're using chemicals in order to do this. And these chemicals will travel through the cardiovascular system, through the blood, and they're produced in one area, pass through the blood, go to another area, travel to another area to what we would call a target tissue. And this target tissue will then react to the chemical that is being sent, these hormones, as long as they have specific receptors for the specific chemicals that are being sent. So in the case of, say, something like a thyroid hormone, which we would call it a major metabolic hormone. This is a hormone that can affect most of the body tissues, okay? Very important. Growth hormone is another one that can be released in the body and can affect many of the body tissues, okay? But there are some other hormones where we're not going to have as many receptors for them because they're just not going to have any type of action that'll take place as a result of interacting with the specific chemicals. So let's move on into the PowerPoint here. So I said to you that there's hormones. These are these chemical messengers. They can travel over long distances, going from the area point of origin where it's synthesized to where it travels and then go to a target tissue and have some type of action, right? I mentioned to you that the endocrine system does work in conjunction with the nervous system, but I would tell you that the endocrine system is slower acting but longer lasting, whereas the nervous system is quick acting and shorter lasting, doesn't have as long a duration of a response after the action takes place with the nervous system control. But the endocrine system can have a longer lasting effect, consists of these hormone producing glands, the cells and organs. And so we have the glands that are producing, traveling in the blood, the chemicals, the hormones, and then the tissues that are being affected by those hormones. So this is an interesting way to think about hormones and how they do what they do. As far as knowing that 2 or 3 hormones may affect the same process, we can have synergistic working together. We can have permissive action where one hormone can exert its effect only if another hormone primes the target cell. So in other words, we need to actually have multiple glands producing multiple chemical messengers, hormones, that will then initially bring about the release of a certain hormone and a certain action that can take place. And opposing, just being in opposition, one hormone can oppose the effect of another. So just as we talked about in the muscular system, how we can have muscles that are working synergistically or in opposition to each other, right? Antagonistically. Same thing too is regarding the hormones and how they do what they do, as far as the action can work in coinciding with another gland and hormone or in opposition. Here's a good image that we posted regarding the different glands and such, and including the hypothalamus and the pineal gland, part of and the pituitary gland, all centrally located within the central nervous system. And really what we were going to see here is that the pituitary gland, we would consider that the master controller gland. This is the gland that is going to send hormones that will affect the majority of the body parts and affect other glands as well, so that they can release their particular hormones. In the case of the hypothalamus is an area present within the very deep part of the brain called the third ventricle that will actually control what takes place with the pituitary gland. So if the pituitary gland would be considered the master gland, the hypothalamus would be considered the master controller of the pituitary gland. And you'll see in this upper right-hand corner here that you'll see the hypothalamus area, part of the third ventricle, and its correlation and its connection to the pituitary gland via this, we call this the pituitary stalk, or another term is used, it's called the infundibulum. It's just a connection between that part of the brain and the pituitary gland itself. Okay, and you'll see the other glands that we have listed here, and we'll be talking about them in detail. there are hormones that are, whether they're steroid hormones or non-steroid hormones, these hormones will then have the ability to, as the case in a steroid hormone, directly interact with the cell DNA, or in the case of non-steroidal hormones, they are then acting indirectly at the cell plasma membrane, at the cell surface with receptors, and then will in turn cause action to take place inside of the cell as a result of what's called a secondary messenger. Right? And so very important to realize that we either have receptors for these hormones either outside of the cell or inside of the cell. Okay. And here you see an example of that as far as what's taking place as far as the steroid hormone. See here, moving from the blood into the interstitial fluid, bathing a target cell. So all the cells have fluid surrounding them and inside of them also. Okay, so the steroid hormone, it's lipid soluble, so the plasma membrane, this cell membrane, is also a lipid, so it can pass right through and enter into the nucleus and cause some type of change. Whereas with the peptide hormones, right, with the non-steroid hormones, they cannot enter into the cell. So they have to enter and interact with, not enter, but interact with receptors on the plasma membrane, on the cell membrane, which will in turn then cause changes to take place inside of the cell. So, I mentioned to you these two important parts of the nervous system, the hypothalamus and then the pituitary gland, which has a very intimate connection with the hypothalamus. So you'll see here, it's quite interesting also, is that there are parts of actually the, let's say the posterior aspect, one portion of the pituitary gland, there's an anterior and a posterior. The posterior pituitary, right? So the pituitary gland has two parts, anterior and posterior. The posterior has neurological tissue present, and it also is receiving hormones. It's not producing hormones, it's receiving hormones from the hypothalamus and then sending them out into the body when needed. And those are, in particular, their antidiuretic hormone and also oxytocin, involved in contraction of the uterus for pregnancy, right, to deliver a baby. So very, very important hormones. And so the pituitary gland stores and releases hormones made in the hypothalamus, and it also produces its own hormones. Okay? You see here, as far as that posterior pituitary, right, it's sending out these two hormones, antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. So I said to you, just, as far as oxytocin, so it's involved in also milk letdown. So that's why they're showing you the mammary glands. So breast milk actually being able to aid in the whole production of the breast milk and release of the breast milk, oxytocin. The contraction of the uterine wall, oxytocin. ADH, it's called antidiuretic hormone. And this hormone actually works to prevent and to conserve water. That would be the best way to put it. Conserve water, meaning if I drink water, I'm not going to produce as much urine. My body will hold on to the water more. And that's what the purpose for antidiuretic hormone would be. And so this is involved in homeostasis of your blood pressure, of your actual level of the amount of blood flowing through your body. We produce urine as a result of filtration of blood, so we can affect the blood volume. And if we have and I don't want to give you too much information, but if we have a high blood volume, we have a high blood pressure. If we have a lower blood volume, we have a lower blood pressure. So fluid levels are very important. And so ADH, water conserving hormone, it's really involved in affecting fluid levels in the body. That's an important job it does. Here you're seeing, as far as the different hormones that are being produced via the posterior pituitary gland. I said to you that it's more nervous tissue. The anterior pituitary is glandular tissue. And so we produce these other hormones here, which will affect the adrenal glands, which sit upon top of the kidneys, the thyroid gland, your ovaries and your testes, as far as for the reproductive system, mammary glands, as far as for the ability to produce release of milk and production of milk. You'll see here, as far as causes milk to move into the secretory ducts, that's the oxytocin, and then prolactin, right? So it's stimulating, it's working towards aiding in the production of milk and also stimulates and sustains the milk production. And really, know this, that the mom is breastfeeding, right? The action of the baby getting the milk, as far as breastfeeding, will stimulate the mother to produce more and continually produce more milk. Once the mother stops breastfeeding, then that's a method where the body realizes, hey, we're not having this milk being released from the body, so we're going to stop, or we're going to slow down the production of milk. Right? And then growth hormone, like I said to you, that really most of the cells in the body can respond to this hormone in order to, produce more, in size and growth. So, from an infant to an adult, how those cells and those tissues grow, growth hormone plays an important part, as well as thyroid hormone. So you see here that the anterior pituitary gland synthesizes and secretes these hormones. Okay? And you saw here as far as the action and what they'll do. You'll see here as far as, so we have, now it's been reversed from the other image, okay? So here we have posterior pituitary, anterior pituitary. So posterior pituitary, this would be, like I said, oxytocin and ADH. Anterior pituitary, all these other hormones, as far as thyroid stimulating hormone, ACTH, follicle stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone. These are very important as far as luteinizing hormone for the female to release the egg every month. Okay, so upon ovulation occurs as a result of spiked levels of that luteinizing hormone. And so this is really when mid-cycle for a female, right? Luteinizing hormone, it spikes mid-cycle. Once the egg is released, you have about approximately 5 to 7 days where the female can become pregnant because the egg has been released into the uterine tubes. So there's a specific time when you can get pregnant. If there's no egg that's been released, you can't get pregnant, right? Prolactin, again, we said regarding breast milk production, endorphins. So these are pain receptors in the brain, and so the chemicals can react to, not, the endorphins themselves are not pain receptors, but there are pain receptors present within the body that can respond to these body's natural analgesics. So like you take Tylenol or ibuprofen, endorphins are a natural analgesic produced by the body. And here's just another good image to show you these different hormones from the different areas that are being released. Whether it's, now this is in the opposite direction. You see here, anterior's here, posterior's here. So the images just have to, I'm sorry, they've switched them around a bit depending on what image you're looking at. But here we have posterior pituitary, anterior pituitary. And here's just another image. So I've tried to really give you multiple images, and this one's just nice in that you can actually see, what's being actually stimulated as a result of the hormones being released from the different areas, whether it's posterior or anterior pituitary. Here's just another image just showing you again as far as in the anterior pituitary. So these are all anterior pituitary. These are the hormones and the action that can occur at those sites. Now, this term tropic hormone, right? So what it means is that it's a hormone that will cause another gland in the endocrine system to release another hormone, which will in turn affect another gland, which will affect the release of, cause the action of another hormone to be released. And so understand this, that we have the hypothalamus, the anterior pituitary, and the thyroid gland all being involved in release of thyroid hormone, okay, which is a major metabolic hormone, which will affect functioning of the body. So know this, that if I have too high a level of thyroid hormone, the action of my body is going to be kind of revved up and it's going to be really accelerated. Whereas if I have too low a level of thyroid hormone, this is going to affect the body in such a way that you're going to be very sluggish, fatigued and such, and many other issues going on. So that in the case of a lower thyroid hormone, really the body kind of slows down in its functions throughout the body. So what we're seeing here is that tropic hormones are these TRH and TSH, which will in turn, produced by these hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary, will stimulate then the thyroid gland to then release thyroid hormone. Without this chain of events that occur, hypothalamus to the pituitary, pituitary to the thyroid gland, we're not going to have a release of thyroid hormone. Excuse me one moment, folks. I'll be. All right, folks. So let's do this. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I'm going to ask if there.
Question about that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to. I wanted to stop for a moment, see if I could answer some questions. So Vito, go ahead.
The diagram you just showed us with the hormones that trigger the next hormone.
Yes,
it said
the
it
tropic
stimulated or could inhibit it. It showed that like the top one can skip over all the other ones and inhibit the bottom one. Is that what it was showing?
So that chain of events have to occur in order for the thyroid hormone to be released. Okay.
Yeah, but when
so in other words,
it showed it with the inhibits, it showed it that it could actually, the way it was drawn, it could go from the top, skip over everything straight to the bottom. I'm just not
no,
sure.
no, that's not the case, really. It goes from the hypothalamus can affect the pituitary, which the pituitary then can stimulate then the thyroid gland. So it's really not. So if one of those issues, if the hypothalamus or the pituitary is not doing their function, the thyroid hormone's is going to have a problem. It won't be released.
Okay, because it showed two different. It showed inhibits too, and that's what I was unsure about. Okay.
Well, okay, yeah. Let me give me one moment. Let me just go to that image and just see here. So what it's showing you here as far as inhibition is as far as if you have enough of the hormone that's being released, then it's going to it's going to limit how much hormone is being released. So in other words, do we want too much thyroid hormone being released? No, we do not. We want the proper levels of the hormone being released. So if we have enough thyroid stimulating hormone, it's going to then send it back to the pituitary, or if we have enough thyroid releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, it's going to then communicate and say, hey, we have enough of TRH, we have enough TSH, which will in turn help and limit the amount of thyroid hormone being produced. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure what it had that second row for, but I get it now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's what's going on. That's the case of what's going on there. Okay.
Is there a way to
Anybody else have any questions?
Yes, sir. Is there any way to regulate the thyroid without use of synthroid or levothyroxine?
Yeah, that's so people will say that there are different other types of natural methods and such. And so, really that's a key issue and really a difficult thing to really say that can actually really take place. Because I would tell you that within society and within our population at this point in time, many people have thyroid issues. Okay. And there are many chemicals that are present within our food supply that we have that can actually affect what goes on also with the release of thyroid hormone. So it's not just a simple yay or nay, so to speak. You understand what I'm saying? It's a very complex issue, to be honest. And so working with an endocrinologist is what recommended. Go ahead.
So then the other question that I have is, if a person is for example, diagnosed with hypothyroidism, which basically is what you were just saying, that it slows down the system and a person is more sluggish.
Yes.
How you call it? If a person falls within normal range, what happens at that point?
Yeah, so that's the other thing also so it's a delicate balance is what I'm going to tell you. And working with someone who is that's their specialty is endocrinology, over what your family doctor might be recommending, because you'll have blood work done, and there are more specific sensitive types of tests that can be done in order to check your thyroid hormone levels. Okay. and they're more expensive, but they can give you more of an accurate understanding of what's going on with the thyroid hormone levels. Okay, so it's more of a specialist input into your health than just a family doctor's input into your health. Does that make sense to you? Because endocrinology is very the balance that goes on. Like I said, I use the word delicate balance. That's the truth, really. The levels have to be maintained, and if they're not maintained, yeah, hypothyroidism is terrible, as well as the opposite, hyperthyroidism.
Yep.
Okay.
I know.
Yeah. So like
I knew someone a couple years back that she since has passed away, but I remember that there was one point where she was at a healthy weight, and then all of a sudden, you know, she had like hyperthyroid, and she would get real skinny, and then she would
yes.
stabilize, and then all of a sudden her thyroid, she would go hypo, so it was like she would gain weight, so like her thyroid was up and down. So
yeah, so it's really it's a very challenging thing. So like I said, just that one hormone right there, as far as thyroid hormone levels, how that can affect many body systems, not just one area of the body. Okay, so yeah, that's why we call it, like I said, a major metabolic hormone. It affects the metabolism of the whole body and many systems, not just one system.
So when the thyroid falls into like normal range or whatever, is it normal, not normal to stop giving the patient medication for it, to treat it?
Well, no, see, because the level of medication that they're doing, that this is why you get tested also. If you have thyroid issues, you're getting tested regularly. You're not just getting tested once a year and that's it. You know, they're monitoring the levels to see, you know, how much hormone, you know, is your body adapting, or does your body need more thyroid hormone or less as a result, you know, medication wise. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's, yeah, like I said, it's a complex issue for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. You're welcome. Does anybody else, Raylan?
Going off of what she was saying, my aunt, she is on dialysis for her kidneys, and
Yes.
she has issues with her thyroid gland because she goes up and down with weight from surgery so much, like being on different medications and stuff. So she's just like one time she was in surgery, like they remove I think fat or something from her. They remove like veins from her arm or her leg or something and put them somewhere else, or does something like that. And like she'll be in surgery, and then she'll go up and down with weight like really bad. Like she'll be like really skinny, and then she'll be like really like heavy, and then go back to being like a normal weight, and then going back to being heavy, back to being really skinny, and it's just like a back and forth type of deal.
And that's a terrible thing, right? Because really, so you see here, as far as how that can affect multiple body systems, not just one area of the body. And so if it's affecting the weight, it's also affecting other body systems for sure. As far as it can affect the cardiovascular system, it can affect, you know, the integument, the skin, many other areas of how the body functions, your digestive system. Yeah. It's really tough. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Adonis, also. And thank you, Vito. Thank you, Raylyn. Anybody else? Okay. I'm going to hide everyone again, and we'll come back to sharing my screen, the PowerPoint. Okay, folks, so you'll see here as far as long-term controllers. So hormones typically regulate activities that occur over an extended period of time. So it's not just something that needs to happen real quick. So nervous system, you know, you touch something hot, it reacts very quickly. The action just is very quick. Doesn't last very long, but it's a quick action. Hormones, they, excuse me, take a long time to, they can take a longer time to cause change, but then that change can be extended for longer periods of time, okay? So let's look at growth hormone, Okay, so growth hormone is something that you, I think, are all familiar with, and you've seen people who have quite tall, and sometimes it's just as a result of genetics, and sometimes it's as a result of issues with the pituitary gland, and they're kicking out too much growth hormone. Okay, so major effects on the body growth, we get that, and the term itself, just the name of it, gives you that indication there. If you've stopped growing as far as in height, then what can happen is that if you're still having too high levels of growth hormone, you can have something called acromegaly. And this can affect the size of your forehead, the size of your cheeks, your jaw, your hands, and your feet. They continue to still grow. And this can really have quite a dramatic effect on a patient's appearance. So here we have a gentleman who is, and I think he might be even a little bit taller now, also, that he is the really tall gentleman, 7'8" and 1/3 inches, 500 pounds. That's a massive human being, right? Andre the Giant was also very tall, and he also exhibited signs of acromegaly. If you look at pictures of his face from when he was younger to as he had gotten older, his face absolutely changed as a result of high levels of growth hormone present in his body, flowing through his body.
Hey, how about another WWE superstar, the Great Khali?
Yeah, that was another gentleman who was over 7 foot tall. Yeah,
Wow.
indeed.
The
But
Big Show.
you'll notice with, yeah, all these guys, very large. But then you'll look at some other people, Shaquille O'Neal. He did not have any type of tumor going on. He just was genetically a very tall human being, right? So, it's kind of just how, depending upon what's being affected, that can cause the growth. But we're talking about here as far as patients who have issues that are affecting the endocrine system that are causing them to grow, or in the case of pituitary dwarfism, not grow. Okay, so it can be very petite, and patients with pituitary dwarfism can have more of a symmetry to their body. So it's as if you took a person, an adult person, and the proportions, right, with the arms and the extremities, lower and upper, and the head and the trunk, that proportion to an adult, and just shrunk it, and that would be a pituitary dwarf. Whereas someone who is the disproportionate dwarfism, that's different. That's not as a result of issues with the pituitary, but here we can have pituitary dwarfism, and you'll see here that they just look like they're a human that's just been shrunk as far as proportionate. But you'll see here with the disproportionate, you can see the trunk, the extremities can be different proportions to an adult human. And I recall, I know this child was quite young at this picture here, but still the shape of a doll, really, as far as height and size. So the thyroid hormone. So thyroid gland, again, like I've said multiple times, major metabolic hormone. Okay, the thyroid gland is anterior. It's in the front area of the lower portion of the neck. Okay, and what'll happen is that we are involved in producing thyroid hormone, right? The basal metabolic rate. So if your metabolic rate is what it should be at a normal rate, you're not going to gain weight or lose weight. You're just going to maintain a regular weight. If your metabolic rate is accelerated, if that metabolic rate is accelerated, then your body will be accelerated as far as the actions are concerned. You can have high blood pressure, you can be sweating, you can be many issues that can go on as far as an accelerated body rate. Or basal metabolic rate that's low, right? The opposite can occur as far as then functions are going to be slow, weight gain can occur. So with that kind of a situation, it's issue to grow, to be obese, right? Can be many factors, be fatigued as a result of a low metabolic rate. So when we're thinking of thyroid hormone, high levels of thyroid hormone, basal metabolic rate is accelerated. Low thyroid hormone, basal metabolic rate is lower. And so as a result of slower functioning, you're going to have the result in, weight gain, low blood pressure, issues like that. Also calcitonin. Calcitonin helps to maintain these blood calcium levels. Parathyroid hormone, which is a gland, the parathyroid glands are located on the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland. We'll show in just a few minutes here. But parathyroid hormone is an antagonistic hormone to calcitonin. So one will help, so calcitonin lowers blood calcium levels. PTH, or parathyroid hormone, increases blood calcium levels. And blood calcium levels are important because if we have issues, well, really, the function of our nervous system, the function of our muscular system, we need calcium flowing in order to, and calcium ions need to be present in order for those systems to function properly. Iodine, very important as far as needed for thyroid hormone to be produced. If we're deficient, we can end up developing a goiter. So a goiter is an enlargement of the thyroid gland. Now know that even, deficiency, hypothyroidism, but even hyperthyroidism can also develop a goiter, an increase in the size of the thyroid gland. So we've talked about these in terms of hypo and hyperthyroid. So hypo, low levels of thyroid hormone; hyper, high levels of thyroid hormone. This Graves' disease is an autoimmune disease that is a form of hyperthyroidism. Okay. Now I said to you that this PTH, parathyroid hormone, developed by these and synthesized by these parathyroid glands that are located on the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland itself, they will help to increase blood calcium levels. So now, if we're increasing blood calcium levels, this is as a result of bone being broken down on a quicker rate. So if we break down bone, we release calcium into the blood, okay, because calcium is stored in the bone. So if we break down bone at a quicker rate, we'll release more calcium into the blood, and this will increase the amount of calcium levels in the body. So PTH stimulates this breaking down of the bone in order to release calcium from the storehouse within the skeletal system. You'll see here, as far as giving you an image here, just so that you're thinking in terms of what's going on as far as hypothyroidism is concerned. So this thinning hair loss of eyebrow hairs, right? So it's quite interesting how it affects the integumentary system, right? The enlarged thyroid gland itself, so that thyroid gland can become enlarged in the case of the goiter. A slow heartbeat, again, this is hypo. Infertility, increase in your menstruation for the females. Constipation, so a slowing down of the digestive processes. We're having issues with circulation, so cool extremities and swelling of the limbs. So circulation as far as for the blood and also as far as for the lymph can be affected. Weight gain, poor memory, intolerance. So people who have issues with intolerance to the cold can possibly have issues with their thyroid gland. Feeling of tiredness, fatigue, hypothyroidism. Hyperthyroidism. So really hyperthyroidism, your body is jacked up and you have a higher blood pressure. You can have issues with what's called exophthalmos. See how the eyes are kind of bulging? That's called exophthalmos. And so it creates kind of increase in blood pressure, just increase in the total action as far as you can have diarrhea, issues with digestive issues. You'll see here with the hypothyroidism, you have issues with the hair as well as the increase in size of the thyroid gland itself. Here's someone who had hypothyroidism 2005 to 2009. See the difference as far as the weight gain and such. And this is just showing you, okay, so what's taking place. It's showing you the same image that we saw earlier there as far as this right here, as far as this chain of hormones, glands, and or nervous system structure, the hypothalamus, and the hormones that are being released and what's taking place as a result, where we end up having then thyroid hormone being released. So here's that thyroid gland, it's the anterior of the neck, and you'll see here the Adam's apple is inferior to that, and this is what's called thyroid cartilage. thyroid cartilage right here. Here's the hyoid bone, inferior to that. This is your trachea, your windpipe, right? And here we're seeing a little bit of an enlargement of thyroid gland. Here's the posterior aspect of your thyroid gland. And so here's the throat, okay? Here's the throat. This is the, your pharynx is your throat. And so you have here, you're looking at the posterior aspect, and you're seeing here as far as these 4 glands, the parathyroid glands, and you're seeing here a child because there's issues as far as calcium levels. You see the bowing of the legs here, okay? Right, you see the change of deformity that's going on here as far as in the legs. That can really affect how the patient walks, and so that's a major issue here. So you're seeing here as far as that osteoclasts, these are the special types of cells that will be involved in breaking down bone, releasing calcium into the blood, okay? As well as you're increasing absorption of calcium via the digestive system, and also increasing calcium reabsorption in the kidneys. This is called the nephron. So we'll talk about that in the urinary system. But all to be involved in causing an action to increase the blood calcium levels within the body, parathyroid hormone. So calcitonin does the opposite. It's antagonistic. All right, calcitonin will actually decrease blood calcium levels. Now, here's a situation called cretinism, and this is very sad. If a patient is not treated as they are an infant, so what happens is that there's a lack of thyroid hormone, okay, being produced, and so we can test for this, right? If the thyroid hormone is not, if this lack of thyroid hormone being produced by the child is not addressed and given thyroid hormone, right, it'll lead to severe and irreparable mental defects, okay, so mental disabilities as far as just having an insufficiency of the ability for the brain to cognitively perform like it should. Stunted growth, so they're going to be much shorter in stature, reduced growth and function in many organs. So there's a lot of health issues that can go on if cretinism is not addressed early on. So let me stop for a moment here and just see if there's any other questions. Let's see what time we have here. Okay, so we have more time. We'll take a break in about 10 minutes. So are there any questions or any comments that anybody would like to add from what we've been going over so far? We're good? Okay, folks, I'll proceed and move on. So the adrenal glands sit on top of the kidneys. Okay, so they sit on top of the kidneys, and there's also, just like with the pituitary gland, the adrenal glands have a nervous tissue area in the inside of the adrenal glands, and on the outside, the cortex is merely glandular. So the inside is nervous tissue, the medulla. On the outside of the adrenal gland would be the cortex, and that's glandular. And so you'll see here as far as release of these special types of hormones for the cortex. And then as far as the medulla, the inner portion of the adrenal gland, that's releasing adrenaline, noradrenaline, also known as epinephrine, norepinephrine. So very much a stimulatory. So when you have a reaction to, I see a bear and I'm like, I'm gonna do something, right? What do? Your body will kick out more epinephrine, more adrenaline, and so that'll hype you up so that you can either run or fight, or hopefully just get away from the bear and the problem. Okay, so in the case of these cortisol is known as the stress hormone. Okay, you've probably heard of that before, right? And the stress hormone. So for short periods of time, right, the cortisol is a good thing. It can raise blood glucose levels, right? And it can give you the ability to fight or run from whatever it is that short term is affecting the body during the time of stress. Now, if a body is under continual stress, then the increased levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, present within the body are not a good thing. And so it can lead to an elevation of blood glucose levels, which can lead to weight gain. Okay. It can also lead to an inhibiting your immune system from functioning, okay, as well as it possibly should. So it's anti-inflammatory, okay. Anti-inflammatory is a good thing, short term, long term. It can really inhibit your body's immune response to whatever you may be coming in contact with, and that's not a good thing. And so we see here, as far as hypercortisolism, so an increase, the increased levels of cortisol within the body of that stress hormone can lead to enlarged cell tertica. Means that the pituitary area, the area of the skull where the pituitary gland sits, becomes enlarged. The patient itself will have like this moon shape appearance to their face. Osteoporosis, this bone demineralization, loss of bone minerals and bone density, okay. Hypertension, increase in the size of the left side of the heart, not healthy or good. This humping of the back of the superior aspect of the spine. Obesity, we know what that is. Tumors of the adrenal gland, wrinkled and thin skin, abdominal striae, meaning stretch marks, okay. So multiple issues as far as issues with the actual cycle through the ovarian and uterine cycle can be affected. Muscle weakness, issues as far as with skin ulcerations and little dot hemorrhages and such. Hypercortisol, increased levels of cortisol. Low levels of cortisol, so bronzing of the skin, hyperpigmentation. So this is what Addison's disease, this is what President Kennedy, who was assassinated, right? He suffered from hypocortisolism. Okay? Your adrenal glands do not produce sufficient steroid hormones, and so there can be all other issues going on as far as this bronzing of the skin, low blood pressure, weakness, fatigue, weight loss, okay? So again, opposite of what goes on when we have high levels of cortisol. This is low levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. I showed you here as far as President Kennedy. So other issues as far as hypoglycemia can result if the adrenal cortex makes too little cortisol, okay? So having that issue of hypocortisolism can result in hypoglycemia. But know this, that all humans have periods of time in their day where there are low levels of blood glucose flowing through the body. Just know that. As a result, they're just not even eating for periods of time. But we're talking about more issues with as far as pathology with illness. Right? Also, this term here, this hormone, this aldosterone, right? This mineralocorticoid, right? This also is involved in, just like the antidiuretic hormone helps to maintain issues with your fluid levels, which can also affect the blood pressure. Well, here we go. Aldosterone can also, it causes sodium and water retention. So you're holding on to sodium levels as in the kidneys, as well as you're holding on to water. So you're not producing as much urine, and which as a result, it increases blood volume, which will in turn increase blood pressure, like I said to you earlier today. The cortex also can aid in generation of hormones that are involved in your reproductive system and can be precursors to hormones present within the reproductive system. The medulla, the inner portion of the adrenal gland, this really is important as far as releasing. It's a nerve area. There are neurons present, so it's nervous tissue, and it has this epinephrine, norepinephrine. Okay, you've heard the term adrenaline, noradrenaline. These are terms that are the same terms for what you're seeing there. Regulate blood circulation, carbohydrate use. Really, they're really preparing the body for action, right? And here's just giving you a little bit as far as with how the steps that take place as far as with cortisol, that the stress hormone. And so you see there, hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal cortex, and the eventual release of cortisol. All right. Now, as far as endocrine disruptors, okay? So look at this here as far as what can affect the body's functioning endocrine system. And so look at this here as far as, so these are disruptors. So you'll think interfering with normal hormone synthesis, production of hormones, and the function of the hormones. So lotions, soaps, shampoos, plastic containers. So like you think of issues as far as with like water bottles, right? So recommend getting phthalate free products. Also involved in with PVC. So these products can long-term cause issues with your liver, kidneys, lungs, reproductive system, because they're affecting the endocrine function. And know that some people are more sensitive than others to these chemicals and such. Okay. Stop for a moment here. Let's see if there's any questions. Do we have any questions or comments at this point in time? I think what we'll do right now is let's take a break. We have a few more slides to go. Let me see how many more slides we have. We have about 11 more, 12 more slides. So we have 12 more slides to go. So I think this would be a good time to take a break for 5 minutes. So we'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll finish up the chapter. Okay? Any questions before we begin, before we take our break? Are we good? All right, folks. So I'll put back up my Word document regarding. So I'll share my screen. We'll start back in, so we're at, so 3:05 we'll begin, folks, okay, 3:05. And so take a look at this, please, while we're just making sure, again, knowing as far as the, so the neurological paper, that'll be due 1 week from this Thursday. So not this Thursday, nothing is due as far as the papers, okay, none of that is due. But we will this Thursday have lab class, and we will be talking about the nervous system in particular. And as far as the components of the brain and such. So we'll look at that this Thursday. All right, folks, 3:05. Thank you. We'll be right back in All right, folks, so we have a 1-minute warning. Okay, so 1 minute, we'll start finishing up the PowerPoint. So in 1 minute, 3:05. All right, folks, so let's go back into the PowerPoint. We're going to be looking at the pancreas and its function. So pancreatic islets are these specific areas present within the pancreas. They're just little areas or little islands of tissue present within the pancreas. Primarily, the pancreas is involved in working with the digestive system and producing different ways to buffer, as well as enzymes that will enable the body to break down the material that we take in as far as nutrition is concerned. We'll talk about that digestive system. Right now, we're looking at just the smaller portion of the pancreas that is involved in producing hormones. Okay, and producing the alpha cells, producing glucagon, which helps to raise blood glucose levels. Beta cells, which you are all familiar, many of you have heard about insulin, and insulin really, it lowers blood glucose levels. So it lowers blood glucose levels as a result of its ability to work with the cells of the body to actually have the uptake of glucose, using of glucose in order to aid that to get into the cells. And so that's how it actually lowers the blood glucose levels. And then we have here, as far as this another delta cells, these other cells present within the pancreatic islets that will secrete this growth hormone inhibiting hormone. Okay, so it inhibits insulin and glucagon secretion, which would help to raise blood glucose levels. Okay. Recall we talked about again earlier, cortisol will increase blood glucose levels short term, but really cortisol too high levels of cortisol for extended periods of time increases blood glucose levels for too long and enables weight gain and such, and so obesity. Okay. Diabetes. So this is really what you want to hear when you're thinking of issues with the blood glucose levels. So what's going on as far as the maintenance of your blood glucose levels, homeostasis, the maintenance of a stable level of these glucose flowing within the body, and also working with the digestive system when we are eating to help to insulin being released while we eat, so that we can be able to get that glucose into the cells of the body. And know this, that if we have excess of glucose, right, it's going to be stored in the liver, right? Liver is in the right side of the body, right side, upper right quadrant, we would say. So the kidneys are both sides, bilateral, but the liver is on the right side. So storage of blood glucose excess as glycogen, it's a larger molecule in the liver, and also in the skeletal muscle, the muscles that move the skeleton. Okay? So now we think of this diabetes mellitus, right? This is issues as far as we have type 1 and type 2. Okay, so type 2 is the issue right now, where we're having patients who, as they get older, are having issues with their maintenance of their blood glucose levels because of issues of chronically causing irritation and stress to the pancreas, so that the pancreas is not kicking out effective of insulin, so that it's not really doing what it needs to do. So the blood containing too much sugar damages the capillaries, right? As a result of this type 2 diabetes, it leads to obesity. Okay, Tissues can die, or terrible complications can develop as a result of type 2 diabetes and diabetes in general if not managed. And so we can result in blindness. It can result in the loss of like lower extremities, having to be, you'll have a cut and it won't heal. And so we can actually have your foot or parts of your foot or parts of your leg that have to be amputated as a result of damage resulting from complications of type 2 diabetes. So issues with circulation, blood flow and such, this can be a major problem. Okay. Getting back to type 1 is, you might have heard the term juvenile diabetes. So that's when we think of type 1, we think of also aka also known as juvenile diabetes. And it's an autoimmune process where the beta cells that are producing the insulin are being destroyed. Okay, and so we're not producing enough or any at all insulin. Okay. Also I've mentioned here the prediabetes. So blood sugar levels are elevated, right? And so this patient can be susceptible to becoming a type 2 diabetic. Okay. How about women who have had diabetes, gestational diabetes, while they're pregnant? There's a higher risk for them to also develop type 2 diabetes even after their pregnancy. Okay, so many times after the pregnancy, the patient's body will return to its relative normal, and then the blood sugar levels will be properly maintained, but that person has the risk of, down the road, developing type 2 diabetes. We mentioned this term before, hypoglycemia, and know that what's going on is that there are too low levels, the levels of blood glucose flowing are too low, and this can also be a problem. Okay. Understand that the brain really needs a high volume of blood and oxygen and blood glucose, okay, and for it to function properly. Some other areas of the body that are actually producing hormones. So the gonads. So when you think the gonads, think the testes and also the ovaries, okay? And so estrogen, you'll see here I put is a feminizing hormone. So having higher levels of estrogen in the body can result in, and especially at puberty, can result in the production of female sex characteristics, okay? Whereas for the male, higher levels of testosterone can result in a masculinizing type of effect on the body, okay? What makes a female a female and a male a male? What causes adult onset? Okay, sorry, I'm gonna go back. I'm stop sharing for a moment here. I have a question. So Ernest, thank you for your question. What causes adult onset of type 1 diabetes? I had a friend in the military almost slipped into a coma because he developed type 1 and had thought it was exclusive to, yeah, so it's not exclusive to children. Yes, that's a very good point. And so can someone like that be genetically predisposed to this, right? So their body can adapt for a long period of time. But again, I said to you that it's an autoimmune type of a disorder. So the body is actually attacking these cells that are the beta cells that are producing the insulin. So it can be a slower process or a faster process. So it doesn't have to be just with children. So yeah, thank you for that input there. So, you know, think really in terms of genetics can be the issue there. Something going on within the body. It's autoimmune. Your body. So just think of like HIV, and then eventually could develop into AIDS, right? It's this, your body's attacking yourself, whether it's attacking the immune system, say in HIV, as far as specifically the helper T cells, which are involved in really promoting the immune function, or in the case of the pancreas, affecting these beta cells present within the islets that are producing the insulin. Or how about in the case of like in Graves' disease, right? I said to you that that's a hyperthyroidism, high levels of thyroid hormone. So we're attacking what's going on as far as the thyroid cells and production of. So it's just really, folks, these autoimmune type disorders can be devastating to the human body.
I have one question.
Sure, go for it.
Talking about sex hormones, one of my friends is transgender, female to male, and he eventually wants to get testosterone. How
Yes.
would that affect like
Sure.
the estrogen and
so-
all that kind of stuff? Like how would that?
Understood, yeah. So it's quite a balance, right? So it is a balance there. So and they're working with specific doctors that know the protocols for that, right? But like I said to you, that just think about this. Testosterone is a masculinizing hormone, so it really makes the male who the male is. So facial hair, the whole 9 yards, the increase in skeletal muscle development, right? Right, bone density also is a part of that, as well as increase in the maturity of the male sex reproductive organs, right? Whereas estrogen is the feminizing hormone. So it's involved in the production of breasts. So you're going to have less facial hair, right? So you're going to have issues with wider hips and increase in distribution in areas of the breasts and the hips as far as adipose tissue, fat. So and also then the maturation of the female reproductive hormone, female reproductive organs. So yeah, feminizing and masculinizing hormones. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, it's one of those things where that's very it's complicated and it's really difficult as far as specialists are involved in that as far as figuring things out regarding levels and such. And so really endocrinology is quite the field as far as we can tell just by just studying this little simple chapter, right?
Yeah.
You can see, yeah, it's there. When you have an imbalance, no matter where it is, it can really affect the function of the entire body and many different systems. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so we'll finish up. I'm going to share my screen and we'll finish up the chapter here. So, all right, so we look at the pineal gland. So the pineal gland is in the posterior aspect of the inner portion of the brain. I'm going to change. There we go. So I'll come back to the slide in just one moment. So all the way in the beginning. Here we go. And what you're seeing right here, folks, is that, is that if we're looking at, here would be the pituitary and the hypothalamus. Well, in this region of the brain, right, inner brain, like really the core of the brain, the inside of the cerebral hemispheres, would be this area here called the pineal gland, aka the pineal body, right here. And what that will do is that will produce a hormone called melatonin. Okay, so melatonin, not melanin. Melanin is a pigment. Melatonin is involved in your body's natural rhythm as far as helping you to be more calm when the light outside, when the sun goes down and it gets dark outside, your body says, hey, well, I should be going to sleep soon. And so it kicks out this hormone that chills you out, and it really does calm you. Okay, and some people would even take this as would even take melatonin as a supplement in order to help them natural way of helping them to go to sleep, aiding that. Here we have an image of, and I will be talking more about this in the reproductive system, but you can see here that we have the ovarian cycle and the uterine cycle. And so this would be the actual lining of the uterus. So you'll see here, this represents menses, this represents blood flow, blood loss, okay, bleeding. Here we have it also again here, bleeding. And here, mid-cycle, if you look up here, the egg is being released because what's going on is that there's this high level of this hormone called luteinizing hormone. And you'll see the thickness here of the uterine lining. So it reaches the thickest it will get here, it coinciding with the release of the egg, because during this period of time, if the egg's released in the uterine tube and the sperm come together forming the zygote, right, then we have this the little fertilizations taking place, and we need to then what? We need to have this fertilized egg being implanted into this thick lining, okay? If there's no fertilization that's taking place of this egg that's being released, then what happens? Well, we have a drop in progesterone levels, which will lead to the bleeding. And this will lead to, then that's the beginning of the cycle, okay? Which is approximately 28 days. And again, we'll go over that at the end of the semester, okay? So you see here, as far as the testes and the ovaries involved in the reproductive cycle, and we'll get into that in more detail. You'll see as far as skeletal muscle, this irisin produced during and after exercise targets white adipose cells to convert to brown adipose cells, which brown adipose tissue, which is brown fat. Infants, children have higher levels of this, and it's really an insulator, and it really helps to actually produce heat. Okay, and it's healthy fat, so to speak, within the body, whereas like having too much fat, adipose tissue, not a good thing. We know that as far as obesity is concerned, and it can lead to type 2 diabetes as well as other complications, high blood pressure, so on. The thymus gland is involved in, and we'll talk about this in more detail regarding the thymus gland being involved in maturation of T cells. These are T lymphocyte cells involved in your immune function. We'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, but not right at the moment. But just know that they release a hormone called thymosin. Heart also can release this ANP, this atrial natriuretic peptide. It can help to lower blood pressure, but really, if someone has chronic blood pressure, high blood pressure issues, it's just not strong enough to make a difference. Okay. Also, the GI tract can produce hormones also that are involved in your ability to be hungry or to be sated, to have your not be hungry. Okay, and also roles in digestion. And so really know that as far as the endocrine system is concerned, maintaining healthy levels of whatever it may be within the body that we're looking at, okay? So whether it's metabolism, growth, as far as growth hormone, as far as metabolism of thyroid hormone, or blood calcium levels as far as calcitonin and parathyroid hormone, or blood glucose levels as far as glucagon and insulin, right? So you see how there's these hormones that work against each other. One will help to increase or decrease. Very important as far as maintaining these proper, healthy, normal levels of whatever it may be that we're trying to regulate within the body. Okay, very good, folks.